Good evening, Rechavia Nachlaot. Good evening to all of our friends and regular class participants. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight. It is 7:30 Tuesday evening, and we have our regular Tuesday night class in Chassidut. And a few weeks ago, we began a new course in Simcha called Seriously Happy. And hopefully, it's going to help us. Hopefully, it's already helped us. And hopefully the more that we learn, it will help us really make Simcha, true, deep Simcha, a reality and not just something for the books. Before we start, I just want to mention that every morning we have a class right here on Zoom, same Zoom. Every morning we have a class at 9:30 a.m., half hour, same Zoom room, number 770. What else? 800-1717. And Thursday night, we have Big Farbrengen right here, this Thursday night, by Rabbi Ephraim Mintz, Executive Director of JLI Worldwide, Jewish Learning Institute. So please join us and also spread the word so we can have as many people as possible participate in the Farbrengen. Of course, prepare yourself some l'chaim and some food so that we should be able to also have some materialistic part of the Farbrengen. I would like to start today's class with a story which is based on a statement in the Talmud. And this is going to be the foundation for today's class. The Talmud says something very difficult to understand, and it's actually a Mishnah. The Talmud explains it, but it's a Mishnah. It's based on a Mishnah. The final Mishnah of the Tractate of Brachot, which is the first tractate of the entire Shas, the entire Mishnah. The Mishnah says that a person has an obligation to bless Hashem when something bad happens, just like a person has an obligation to thank Hashem when something good happens. Someone actually fainted because of this statement in the Mishnah. What am I referring to? I'm referring to a very interesting story which is said about a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Berish Meislish. He was also Rosh Yeshiva, he was the leader of a yeshiva, and he was also a successful businessman. And his business was, probably a couple of 100 years ago, his business was that he would do export from Russia or wherever he was to different countries. He would export logs. He would cut trees from very thick forests, and he would have them packaged up on rafts, and the rafts would carry the logs to different places, and then people would buy them. So one time there was a terrible catastrophe, and there was a huge shipment of logs. And there was a huge storm in the sea, in the ocean, and the entire shipment drowned, and he lost a lot of money within moments. Now, when his family heard about this, they wanted to inform him, but they were afraid that he was going to freak out. They were afraid he's going to faint. So they were breaking their heads to find out how could they break the terrible news that he basically lost a huge investment that he had invested in. And so one of the members of the family had a great idea. They said, "Dear father," I don't know exactly who it was a child or a cousin or whatever, but "Dear Rabbi," he says, it says in the Talmud that a person has to receive a piece of news that is negative with the same simcha, with the same joy as a person that receives a piece of news that is a happy piece of news. How is that possible? So the rabbi answered, it's simple. You have to be happy. Everything is from Hashem. So the student asked, So, for example, if someone loses a huge shipment of logs, totally their whole investment goes down into the deep end. Yeah, you have to simply get up and dance? So the rabbi said, for sure, you have to get up and dance. Then there was silence in the court, in the room. Now, you could almost cut the air with the tension to see what's going to happen. Is the rabbi going to get up and dance? Or is he going to faint? And then the student or the young man said to the rabbi, well, if so, let's get up and dance. When the rabbi heard that, he fell and fainted on the spot. So let's try to analyze this story. If the rabbi truly believed that you have to dance, so then why, when push came to shove, when he was put to the test, why did he faint? Please tell me what you think. You can write down in the chat or on Facebook, you can write down in the comments. Please write down what you think. Why is it that the rabbi actually fainted? If he really believed he should have danced, he should have simply got up and danced. I mean, isn't that what the Mishnah says? You have to thank Hashem for everything that happens, even something, God forbid, which is negative. So we can explain the story from two angles. And each one will give us some kind of direction, hopefully, into the point that we're trying to bring out today in the second half of chapter 26, Chavav. First of all, the first point that we want to bring out from the story is that it's not enough to have faith. Faith is good, but it's not enough. One also needs to have an understanding and internalizing. You know, that's really the difference between Chabad and Chagat or Nehim. What is the abbreviation of Chabad? Chabad is Chachma, Bina, and Da'at. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Now, those are the top three levels of the 10 Sfirot. Then you have Chagat, which is the abbreviation of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet. That's emotion, the three main levels of emotion. And then you have Netzachot, Yesod, Malchut. That's called Nehim, the abbreviation. Chabad is where you internalize it, where you take a piece of information and you take it in. So when we're talking about, for example, there are many examples for this, but we're talking about connecting to a tzaddik, a rebbe. So there are different types of rebbes, different circles, different communities, especially in the Hasidic world. And so you have a rebbe of Chabad, and you have a rebbe in other types of rebbes. And everyone is special. But one of the differences between Chabad, Chassidus, and Chagat is that Chabad, we sit and learn the Chassidus ourselves. Obviously, the Rebbe learns his own Chassidus and he gets inspired by what he learns. And he gets new revelations of teachings of Kabbalah. But that's not enough for us. Because the Rebbe himself, in addition to all of his teachings, he wants us to learn. So when you have Chabad and you take something in, you understand it, then it's a whole other perspective. All of a sudden, a person starts to appreciate much more what we do. So by other Chassid, actually the Rebbe would encourage other Rebbes, for example, Ger, Belz, and there were many other Rebbes that came to visit our Rebbe. And very often the Rebbe would encourage them to institute the learning of Chassidus in their own yeshivas. It doesn't have to be Chabad. It can be the Noam Elimelech. It can be the Sfat Emet. Chidushei Harim, all the different wonderful interpretations of Chassidus from their own Rebbes. Because the Rebbe believed that it was important for everyone to internalize the beautiful concepts of Kabbalah and Chassidus. And so, this individual, this Rabbi Meislish, he knew that you have to dance, but it wasn't internalized. It's one thing, the knowledge, but then to actually feel it, to actually take it in and act accordingly, that's a whole other level. That's a whole other ballgame. And perhaps, obviously because he was subjective, perhaps there was a bit of a gap between the knowledge and the appreciation. Just to explain in short, you have the knowledge of the fact and then the understanding of the fact. Two different concepts. So he knew about the fact, he knew about it, but he didn't understand it. Hasagat hamahut, that's internalizing, taking the mahut, exactly what it is. That's why he didn't faint. That's why he didn't dance. Because that was the natural instinct. If he would have internalized it more, we're not judging him, we're just explaining the story. If he would have internalized it more, then maybe he would have been able to get up and dance. That's point number one that we learned from the story. Point number two is that even after a person understands, that even after, I hope it's not from my end, even after a person learns something and understands it and takes it in, you have the first instinct. You have the first reaction. We're human beings. And it's possible that a person internalized something and is prepared for the challenge. But very often, the way Hashem created us is that we have simply a first instinct. And it's difficult, very difficult to overcome that because you're not ready for it. So if you're quote unquote ready for it, then you can act accordingly. But if you're not ready for it, it's very, very hard. It makes it many, many more times more difficult. And so, even after we have a class and we'll learn about something and we'll internalize it and you'll talk about it with your spouse, you'll talk about it with your children, talk about it with your parents, and you'll discuss it with your friends, and you'll think about it when you're going in the streets, thinking about the Torah lesson that you just heard. We're still human beings. And it's possible, very possible, that it's going to take a while until this becomes your first instinct. And that's a very, very great level. Because naturally, we're drawn to what we see at first glance. Even if you have a lot of control, but there's still that first. So there's a lot of work to be done. After this brief introduction, now we can get to the shir itself. The shir is divided into a few sections. We're going to learn about how it's possible to control 5 things which can disturb, which can get in the way of simcha, of joy. Number 1, physical, materialistic pain and difficulties. Number 2, feelings of fault. Oh, it's, Jewish guilt. Feelings of guilt. Number 2, the war or the challenge with the Yetzer Hara, with inclination. Number 4, to be depressed with what a person's accomplishments may be. And number 5, thoughts that can disturb a person. So let's do one step at a time. The question that we're going to deal with today is, how is it possible to suffer, God forbid, and also to be happy. Because that's really what the Mishnah says. A person is obligated to thank Hashem for the negative things that happen, just like a person is obligated to thank Hashem for the positive things that happen in their life. So we already learned in the first few classes how important it is to be happy. And for sure, everybody wants to be in that place. Just like a little child is naturally happy. The difference is that a child doesn't have problems. And even if they do, they're not aware of it. An adult can have problems, God forbid, either with livelihood, or with parnasa, or with health, God forbid, or with shalom bayit, God forbid, and there could be real issues. But the adult, because they're aware of the issues, it can be hard to be happy. Because if they get a message in the morning that there's a minus in the bank and they know they have to cover it, they'll usually be distraught. But a child, a baby, is naturally happy. How wonderful. Everything is fine and dandy. Everyone wants to be in the neighborhood of children. When we do events for holidays, for the Chagim, before the Chagim, like olive press, for the local kindergartens and local schools, and model matzah baking, I tell the teachers and the kindergarten teachers as well, I tell them, you have the best job in the world. Be with children, around children. There's nothing more heartwarming and giving you a really good feeling than being around the child. So the question that I want to open up the message board with is, how do you feel? Is it possible to be happy also when there is a difficulty? If yes, how do you succeed to do that? Let's give 30 or 40 seconds to please enlighten us. Please share with us your own opinions. Do you think it's possible? Have you ever actually done it? Please share with us how. It seems to be impossible. It seems to be like an oxymoron. How can a person be happy when they're in pain? It's almost as if to say they're happy about the fact that they're in pain. And that cannot be, because they're in pain. So what's there to be happy about? We're back to square one. Why does the Mishnah say that a person is obligated to thank Hashem for something negative that happens, just like they're obligated to thank Hashem for something positive that happens? I'm not sure if there are any comments being written over here. Let me check over here. Yes, I see there are some comments, but I don't want to mess up the live feed. So I'm sure you all have some great comments, and you can still continue to write, but I'm going to continue to try to say a few possible answers. You could say, look at the cup being half full, instead of looking at the cup being half empty. You can say that a person is going to listen to joyous music, even if they're in a difficult state. The fact itself that they're listening to joyous music, that sort of lifts them up out of their negative surrounding atmosphere. Another option is to disconnect oneself from reality. But is that really the goal? When the Mishnah says to be happy about something negative, to disconnect yourself from reality, to run away, it's a very natural thing that people do. They don't want to deal with the issue, so they run away. There are quite a few people that I know, and it's quite a famous thing, of people that are always cracking corny jokes. And unfortunately, very often, it's just like a shield. It's a psychological shield or an emotional shield that a person shouldn't have to deal with the problems. And often people are dealing with serious problems. May Hashem help. And they feel that they're running away. Everyone has their own way of running away. Even if a person puts on the music blasting loud, the problem is still going to be there. So what's the right way? The right way is not to run away from the problem. The real solution is to be happy also with open eyes. To look at the issue in the eyeball, not to run away, and nevertheless to be happy. How is that possible? It seems almost impossible. So to understand this, we have to see how does Yiddishkeit, how does Judaism relate to bad things that happen in a person's life, God forbid. So let's look at what the Gemara explains on what the Talmud, on what the Mishnah says that we mentioned earlier. We quoted the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says that a person has an obligation to bless Hashem for a negative thing that happens, God forbid, just like if something positive happens. So what does the Talmud say? The Talmud says a very logical conversation based on this Mishnah. What is the intention of the Mishnah by saying that you have to bless Hashem for the negative just like you bless Hashem for the positive? If the intention is that you have to do the same bracha, well, let's see. What bracha does a person make if something good happens to a person? The answer is, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hatov v'hameitiv. He who is good, and he does good to others. Thank you, Hashem, for doing good. So maybe the same bracha should be if someone has a negative experience, God forbid for them. But we know that that's not the case. The Mishnah says just one or two Mishnahs earlier that for something bad, a person has to, for example, if someone passes away, so then the family, the children say, Baruch Dayana Emet, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Dayana Emet, the true judge. In other words, we're not interfering into Hashem's judgment. He for sure judges the right thing. So what do we see? That it's not the same bracha. So what does it mean you have an obligation to bless Hashem for something bad, just like something good? It's not the same bracha. It's not the same blessing. So the Gemara answers, actually it's Rava that answers, that the intention is not with the same words of the bracha. What the Mishnah means to say is that a person has to receive, to accept something negative that happens, just like they accept something good that happens. This part of the Gemara is difficult to understand. Because the first option that the Talmud brings, that to make the same bracha for both, good and bad, is still able to be understood. You tell a person basically that they have to understand that also the bad is really good. And therefore, they have to say the same bracha. So, seemingly, that should be the bottom line. Just like a person says for a good thing, thank you Hashem for doing good things. So too, for a bad thing, a person should say, thank you Hashem for doing good things. Because Hashem is good, and everything Hashem does is good, and He's doing good things for others. So on one hand, you're telling me, basically, at the end of this paragraph of the Talmud, that it's a different bracha. On the other hand, you're telling me you have to consider it to be good, even if it's bad. So make up your mind. If it's really good, so you should have the same bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hatov v'hameitiv. He who is good and he who does good. So we're basically back to square one. What becomes quite clear from this Talmud, that if it's really a bad piece of news, how is it possible to be happy? And if it's really good, so why are you saying a bracha, Dayana Emet? Make up your mind. And so the next portion of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain a very powerful concept. That a person should purify their heart from any sadness or worry from worldly matters. Even in their family, children, life, and food, which is parnasa, livelihood. No less than that. In other words, a person has to bring to themselves to a situation that even a drop of bitterness does not creep in to their personal lives. Even when it comes to the most important things in a person's life, children, family, livelihood, health, a person should not allow, at least in principle, should not allow bitterness and depression to creep in. Let's see the second half. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it into English. Lekabel b'simcha. The title is to receive everything with joy. V'hinei, and behold, eitza hayirutza. What is the perfect advice? Letaher et libo, that he should purify his heart. Mikol etzev v'nidnud daga, from any type of depression and shaky concern. Mimili de alma, from worldly matters. Mi'inyanei ha'olam hagashmiyim, from the materialistic worldly matters. Va'afilu midagot biglal, even from worries and concerns which are associated with bane chayu mezone, children, life, and food, health, and livelihood. Muda zot, it's known to everyone. Lakol, ma'amar avotenu zal, what the Chachamim say, kishem shemevarech ala tova, just like a person makes a bracha for the good, kach mevarech ala ra'ah, so too he should make a bracha for the bad, for the negative that happens, God forbid. Upirshu b'Gemara, as it's explained in the Gemara, sha'akavanahi, that the intention is lekabule b'simcha, to receive the bad with joy. Kemo simchat hatova niglit v'nireit, just like something which is good, which it seems to be quite clear, so too, God forbid, if something bad happens, a person lekabule b'simcha, to accept it with a simcha. In other words, on one hand, not to be oblivious to the problem, not to push it under the carpet, but on the other hand, to accept it with simcha. This, once again, seems to be very, very difficult. How is it possible for someone to bring themselves to such a state? And so, here's a story that I want to share with you that hopefully will add to the understanding of this subject. There were tzaddikim that used to go around from town to town on galut. They would take upon themselves an exile. And being on exile, they would put on simple clothes, go to places where no one really knew them. Unlike today, where you have technology that many people see pictures of great rabbis and tzaddikim, so people are more known. But in the olden days, in the little shtetl, you could have a big tzaddik, and he went to just maybe a few kilometers away, a bunch of miles away, to another town, to another city, to another country for sure. Often people didn't know who they were. And so the following two great tzaddikim, they were both Talmidim, students of the holy Maggid of Mezrich, Rabbi Dov Ber, who was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe as well, the author of the Tanya. They were the brothers, Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shmuel Horowitz. And they came to the Maggid of Mezrich, their Rebbe, with a Gemara. And they said, how is it possible to be b'simcha? How is it possible to be with joy? The Maggid did not answer them directly. Sometimes, instead of answering, he would send the questionnaires to someone specific, and they were meant to figure out the answer themselves, being in that place. So also over here, the Maggid said to his students, Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shmuel, your answer you will receive by Rabbi Zusha. Rabbi Zusha was the brother of the great tzaddik. He was also a great tzaddik. And he was the brother of the great tzaddik Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk. And Shashi and I had the great zechut about 17 years ago to be in Ukraine and to be in the small town of Anipoli. I don't know if you want to even call it a town. Literally cut and paste from 300 years ago. The streets weren't even paved. It was muddy, literally like it was with horses and buggies, roosters running around. It was unbelievable. The Maggid of Mezritch himself is buried in the same ohel, in the same tent, the same little building. Rabbi Zusha is there. I think, if I remember correctly, the son of the Maggid, Rabbi Avram the Malach, was a great tzaddik. He's also buried there. And Rabbi Zusha lived in Anipoli. He was called Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli. This is the town that we were in. And when they came to Anipoli, these two brothers, Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shmuel Horowitz, when they came to Anipoli, they looked for Rabbi Zusha's house. And so they looked around and they came to a shack. Apparently, it's not even a shack. It was much worse than that. And they were almost like a tent, a temporary edifice. And the brothers, Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shmuel, were shocked. They saw tremendous poverty for the family of Rabbi Zusha. The walls were about to fall. There was almost no shelves or no dining. The children walked around with torn clothes, and the hunger was calling from their eyes, unfortunately. And in the middle of all of this, Rabbi Zusha is sitting there. His face is shining, is beaming. He's just so happy. You could tell this inner type of happiness coming from within. As if you would think that he finds himself right now in a mansion with so much hatzlacha and so much wealth, like a king. And so the brothers knocked on the door. They came in. Rabbi Zusha said, "Yes, how can I help you?" Well, they said, the Maggid sent us here in order that you should explain to us how to accept suffering with joy. They were awaiting a whole speech, a whole sermon from Rabbi Zusha based on the teachings of Kabbalah, how it's really possible to be happy even when a person is in pain and suffering. But Rabbi Zusha didn't answer. Nevertheless, they felt that there could not be a better answer. Then finally, Rabbi Zusha says, pain? Suffering? I'm supposed to explain to you how it's possible to be happy? I don't understand why the Rebbe sent you to me. I never suffered at all. Then the holy brothers, Rabbi Pinchas and Rabbi Shmuel, looked at each other and they understood very well why the Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber, sent them to Rabbi Zusha. It was obvious that Rabbi Zusha himself knew what was happening, but he didn't allow the poverty and the suffering that he and his family were going through to take him away at all from serving Hashem with simcha. And hopefully this is a story that can explain what the Alter Rebbe says. The key words over here are, it's a quote from the Gemara, L'kabuli b'simcha, to accept that which Hashem gives a person, b'simcha, with joy. It's still not so easy, as we're going to continue to explain. But at least the facts, the more we hear a story of a tzaddik, the more we should be able to appreciate this and to live in the same type of way. I'm just turning over my phone for a second. Please stay right here. Don't go anywhere, even during the advertisements. The brief intermission. Okay. I had to plug my phone in. Hopefully everybody can still see me. And now we see a little bit more of the background of Chabad. In order to understand this, we have a story which is a story from a great tzaddik. His name was Nachum. And the story is he was called Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum, the man of Gamzu. What's Gamzu? Gamzu are the first two words of Gamzu L'Tova. This is also for the good, for the positive. Rabbi Nachum, he was accustomed to saying everything that happened. He was accustomed to say Gamzu L'Tova. This is also for good. Even if something didn't seem good. Nachum Ish Gamzu, it happened once in his time. Thank you, Tzvi, for all of your source sheets, and everyone's highly encouraged to look them all up and to get to know much more of each of these great tzaddikim that Tzvi is sending us to. I hope Facebook can also see the comments on the chat that are being posted over here on Zoom. And the emperor of Rome, who governed Israel at the time, okay. Thank you for making me the host. I'm very humble. The Am Yisrael wanted to appease him. Am Yisrael wanted to make him happy. And so they decided they want to send him a chest filled with gold and silver and diamonds and pearls. Something will really, really make him, show him that Am Yisrael is really respectful of him. And so who would they choose to do so? No one else but the great tzaddik of Nachum Ish Gamzu. And so Nachum Gamzu goes on the way, and he stops off in an inn. And in the middle of the night, I guess the inn owner sensed that Nachum has a big treasure. So he finds a way to get to the treasure box. He opens it up, empties it out, and fills it up with dirt. He locks it back up, puts it back into place, and seemingly Nachum Ish Gamzu has no clue at this point that the pearls and precious stones have been removed. He comes to the emperor, continues in his travels, and he says, Your Majesty, Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael admires you so much, we've decided to bring you a beautiful chest filled with precious diamonds and pearls. And so he's very happy. They bring it to him. He opens it up, and he sees it's none other than earth, dirt. Without blinking an eyelash, Nachum Ish Gamzu turns to Hashem and says, Gam zu l'tova. Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. And so immediately the emperor is furious. Are you making a joke out of me? You're trying to mock me. He tells his servants, throw him in the lion's den. At that moment, Hashem sends a miracle. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, dressed up as one of the servants of the king, and he says, Your Majesty, just before you do that, I want to please suggest something. And that is, you're in a war now. Nachum's great-great-great-grandfather, one of his forefathers, Abraham, when he needed to fight the 4 strong kings in order to save Lot, he threw dirt, and that turned into arrows, and he won over the 4 strong kings. Maybe you should try that. Right now, you're in a war. Let's try it. What do we have to lose? And of course, he tried it, and it turned into arrows. And the emperor was very, very happy with Nachum and Am Yisrael. He sent back many wagon loads filled with all kinds of gifts and riches for the Jewish settlement in Eretz Yisrael. On the way back home to Israel, they stopped off. This time it was a whole entourage that stopped off in the inn. And the owner was shocked. He rubbed his eyes. He couldn't believe it. And he said, "How are you still alive?" He said, "What do you mean? This was unbelievable earth. The king won the war, or was winning the war because of the earth that I brought." And so this guy thought he was a smart aleck. He went to the same place. He filled up a few boxes, a few chests of earth. And of course, he brought it to the emperor, and the emperor tried it out. Obviously, it did not become arrows, and he was sent right to the lion's den. And so, what exactly happened over here with the story with Nachum? What happened was that Nachum Ish Gamzu saw within every single item that it's the hand of Hashem. Even if he didn't appreciate it, his vision, the way he looked, the prism from where he looked at every single thing in the world was part of Hashem's master plan. Everything is for the good. Gamzu l'tova. In his case, Nachum Ish Gamzu was able to see the benefits of his prayer. So often we'll say, whatever Hashem does is for the good. That's true, but not always do we see how it's for the good. Whatever Hashem does is for the good. Nachum Ish Gamzu said, Gamzu l'tova. This earth, the earth itself is l'tova. It's not just that by bringing him earth, he'll sell it for $1 million, or he'll be able to use it to plant a garden, trees in the garden. The objective was that the earth itself was going to win the war. The earth itself turned into arrows. Gamzu l'tova. This earth, not only that there will be good as an outcome in a roundabout way, but directly. Nachum always tried to see within everything in the world, the good from it. And this could have brought him to literal death very quickly. Nevertheless, Nachum Ish Gamzu chose to put on the spiritual lenses and to try to see from within every situation how it's for the good. And so by hearing these stories from our tzaddikim, hopefully we are able to be uplifted and to try to change our perspective, even if we don't always see how things are for the good, to hope and pray that it should be for the good, and most importantly, that it should be good in the most revealed sense of the word. Not just good that a person has to explain to me how it's good. Rather good, which is ultimate good. And so, in summary of what we learned today, we've learned today about trying our best to balance two subjects, seemingly two opposite subjects. On one hand, to realize the reality. If a person is going through a difficult time, then they have to realize it, because only when they realize they'll be able to get out of it. But at the same time, to accept it with joy, which means to try our best to zoom in and to try to see in every situation how it is itself for the good. And by following in the steps of our leaders, following in the steps of our Rebbes, hopefully we're able to bring ourselves to that state. Thank you very much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, you should have a great evening, and we hope to continue Bezrat Hashem next week and throughout the summer. And we'll continue learning Perek Chavav. We'll have another couple of classes till the end of this chapter. And in the meantime, please remember that Thursday night we have a big Farbrengen over here. By the way, there's going to be a special young man who is going to play the clarinet, sung Chabad songs on Zoom. from wherever he is in Israel, I believe in the south. And he will be, his name is Yair Shapiro, and he's going to be playing the clarinet. So please join us and prepare some little foods. You don't have to, but it's always a good thing. Of course, a l'chaim, a little bit of drink. And so hopefully we'll be able to hear Rabbi Ephraim Mintz with great simcha, because that's what we talked about tonight, about the simcha. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, and thank you for joining us.